bioinformatics from University of Bielefeld in Germany, and subsequently worked as a postdoctoral fellow in Department of Biology at University of Padova in Italy, where he established pipelines for Roche 454 based transcriptome analysis for insects and fishes. Thereafter, he moved to the Institute of Botany at the University of Kiel in Germany, where he established multi-omics approaches for characterizing future drug-like compounds, deduced biosynthetic gene clusters of marine fungi, and studied fungal adaptations. Currently, he has to his credit sequencing the largest number of marine fungal genomes in the public domain. During this period, he established strong collaborations with several European groups from Denmark, Germany, France, and Poland. Later, he moved to German Cancer Research Center GKFZ in Heidelberg, Germany, where he worked on familial cancer genomics and developed pipelines for analysis of whole exome and whole genome sequencing data and analysis of more than 300 samples of various cancer types. He is a recipient of prestigious Ramlinga Swamy Fellowship awarded by Department of Biotechnology, Government of India. At Institute of Bioinformatics, he is employing multi-omics approaches for studying cancer and neurological disorders and developing computational pipelines for detailed analysis of genomes. So welcome once again, sir. So now over to you with this to have a discussion with participants. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thanks for such a nice introduction, and I'm really glad to spend some time with you all and participate in training and some of our work and then training. So let me start the screen share. So I have just shared the screen. Okay, so let me start it. So you will probably seeing my presentation.
Yes, sir, it is visible.
Okay, then let's go. Okay, so today I'm going to tell you about protein sequence structure and phylogeny, and primarily I'll give you some example, and then we will do some training on it, and you can also use based on this, if you can also start using your own analysis in future. So why is protein sequence structure and phylogeny is important? Obviously, you do the sequence analysis, structure analysis, and molecular evolution based analysis, but you can actually translate in this information into translational bioinformatics level, where you can resolve by data integration problem related to drug discovery and disease, also in human diseases. And once you have this, you are able to translate it. Actually, you transform one is able to transform data which is publicly available into knowledge, and that will help basic science and clinical science come together, or make a bridge if you're solving from using basic biological sciences or chemical sciences or combinatorial of many basic sciences to solve a clinical problem, say human diseases such as cancer. And we have seen in this pandemic COVID-19, a lot of people from different areas are working together to provide insight into COVID-19 research, and translating that into molecular mechanistic level as well. So that's what is the translational bioinformatics, and the sequence and structure and phylogeny can be a core of. I don't see that there is any analysis where you don't need gene, protein, and structure and phylogeny knowledge in the background. So everywhere you need it. And then the translational bioinformatics can be derived from single omics, and at the same time it can be much more multi-omics, data coming from different resources: genome, exome, transcriptome, epigenome, proteome, metabolome. Proteogenomics is merger of above all of this merging information coming from DNA-seq, proteomics, and then RNA-seq all together is proteogenomics, and then interaction map of all this is interactomics and connectomics, and pharmacogenomics is the pharmacological knowledge, phenotypic knowledge, physiological knowledge, and so on. So this multi-omic knowledge is acquired for the phenotype. Phenotype can be as I'm smiling, I have a different phenotype. If I'm unhappy, it is different phenotype. So if you want to correlate with the plant is under high salt concentration, we have a different nutritional profiling, different type of growth yield. And when you have low salt concentration or any kind of a stress you give it to plant can be happy and unhappy. That can be plant area phenotype. And then phenotype can be merged with multi-omic data, and then you will acquire, combine this to knowledge base, what is previously known in terms of transcription, network, protein, ontology, pathways, synteny, disease, evolution, and then you merge all together, compute with your data, make a model, predictive model, and new information. And this is what overall translational bioinformatics is doing, and primarily it is same as machine learning algorithms will do in a slightly different scale, but the overall idea is the same. So probably many of you are coming from biology or related area or computer science. You probably, if we has used our biological databases, these are the major databases. NCBI is the database from USA, National Center for Biological Sciences, and National Center for Bio, NCBI in short, and it has enormous amount of sub databases. So there are 40 such molecular and literature databases, but number is growing every year to some extent, and the volume in each data set. So apart from NCBI, there is if USA has developed something, similar pattern Europeans have developed. From UK, EBI is maintained, European Bioinformatics Institute managing parallel databases, and then Japanese in Asia have the databases of similar scale called DDBJ, J stand for Japan. And then recently Department of Biotechnology in India has started Indian version. It's also, if you have multiple resources, it's always good. And plus, if there's a research fund and money is getting available, why not to have? Because all of these, if any of one decides, so suppose America decides tomorrow that they will not give data for free or not give data to the rest of the world, at least we have 2 more resources at the moment, and then third, fourth, India and Chinese will be coming up, and then so on. The data will be flourishing in future as well. And these databases, so we'll cover some of these databases and tools, and which is related to protein today, and we'll tell you more about it. So what happens when you are mining? You have a human genome. A human have 23 chromosomes, and our chromosomes are carrying genes and intergenic region. Gene is composed of, so basically if you are from computer science department, so it is a string chromosome is large string of alphabets, ATGC, randomly placed. On that there are condensed region where there is a ATGC has these alphabets have certain regulation, and these regions form a gene-like structure, which is called genomic. DNA has a gene, and gene has exon. Exon is the coding region. Intron is non-coding region. Coding means that will be able to form microRNA and form protein. Next step. So the non-coding region will not be able to form the microRNA by transcription and translation protein, but they also harbor some regulatory elements. So it's a 3 to 3.4 GB in size, a human genome, and then human genome has many regions which are critical. And so if I want to locate healthy individual versus non-healthy individual, we have to remove all common regions and then look for what is the difference between healthy and non-healthy. And so there are databases which one can derive. DVVAR is the genomic structural variation. Or GenBank, as I told you, GenBank is a sequence database, and within the sequence database you have Sequence Archive database, SRA, genomic survey databases, high throughput databases, sequence tag databases, and single nucleotide databases. So data is deriving from the same genome, but the data is pulled into different categories. And then you have expression tag, Unigene, gene profile, protein data bank, protein UniProt, protein conserved domain in the protein. So each component, as you see in the left side and right side, is the database. So numerous databases are possible, and data mining is very critical for understanding. And today's and tomorrow class, we will see a lot of data you can start mining yourself. And that's the whole target of this session and tutorial associated with this talk. So I'm going to tell you about sequence structural and phylogeny in context with a model proteins called serine protease inhibitor. It's a protease inhibitor and primarily formed of this is the side that I have shown you the structure which I have drawn, and it's a single domain protein. Single domain protein means it is a single type of protein present, and it's averaging 300 to 400 amino acid long, and it regulates proteolytic activity in the cell, and it has a red region which is let me go back front, and I'm trying to get the marker. So marker, laser pointer. Okay, so this region is reactive center loop, which is 20 amino acid long, and where the proteases will bind here somewhere, and then they are cleaved. What happens that these serine protease inhibitors are serving as the bed for the proteases. If you have a lot of proteases in our body, what happens? Proteases will kill all good proteins body requires. So proteases are required to kill some protein, but not all protein. So if they are in a limited amount, it is good. If it is there, if it is in a more in amount than requirement, it's like gun in society. You cop need gun, but not that we can give every cop a gun or every citizen a gun. Then violence will be much more. So proteolytic activity is required in the cellular system, but the proteolytic activity should not go very high, otherwise it will kill all the good proteins as well. And you need to kill some protein in the human body. So these serine proteases are controller of this system. They regulate the proteases actually. And so how they regulate? They have the reactive center loop, where the loop will start with G, T, E, and then there are some A, G, small amino acid, and then you have some other amino acid, and then here there is a P1. P1 prime is the reactive actual site where the binding will take place. Protease will think they are killing a normal protein, any protein of their choice, and once they bind to it, they will be killed. So, but what happens during course of these are sequence, and in the sequence, if there is a mutation, these proteases lose. So if there is any change in this red region, then the standard GT, you see there is only G has to be predominantly present, and T or S has to be predominantly present, and E has to be predominantly present. And then 4, 5, A, V, G, some amino etc. required. If there is some mutation during course of evolution, they will lose the inhibitory function, and once inhibitory function is lost, in this system, the normally protein or gene will lose function in this system. Even after losing inhibitory function, they become non-inhibitory and acquire new function. And that's why this SERPINE system is very good for studying sequence analysis, evolution, and other mechanistic approaches. As I told you, in the mechanismic way, a branch mechanism is working here. So suppose protease E, which is in our blood, trypsin versus antitrypsin. Antitrypsin is the SERPINE inhibitor, and protease is floating in there, and so wow, I can kill this protein. And actually, when they are going to kill this serine antithrombin, they themselves will be blocked, destroyed. Both of them will be destroyed. So SERPINE is also destroyed, and corresponding protease is also destroyed. But both will lead into, by sacrificing SERPINEs themselves, they save proteases to unrequired binding to other proteins. So this is the mechanism. And then, since it is found everywhere, the SERPINEs are of different types, and they are found everywhere. So in human body, you see almost all organ and all physiological processes require it, and then they have a role in different diseases such as Alzheimer, pro-hormone convertase, renal development. Green ones are non-inhibitory ones, which have lost the inhibitory function, is still working and adapting a new function, and so on. And then you have angiogenesis, fibrogenesis, apoptosis, inflammation, and complementation activity. Obviously, blood coagulation, I already told you that in the blood, there are a lot of SERPINE involved. Antitrypsin versus trypsin is the classical example in blood clotting, and so on. So these are that makes it very amazing system to study, because it has direct correlation with human physiology and human disorder, and correlated with the several evolutionary cells. So as the human genome was coming up, say 20 years back, when I finished my master's, and that point of time, these two classification systems came up. One classification system is called group-wise classification system, based on human and mouse data initially, and this is group B1 to V6 classification system, based on sequence features plus gene structure features and other features. The clade-wise classification system is based only on sequence analysis. And these are the members. So you see that B and A are multi-member, have many members in the family, and whereas other members in B, there is just D clade has single member, but then in the clade group 3, 4, 5 can have 1 to 5 members, not more than that. Here, whereas in the 1 and 2, there can be many members. And then we'll see why is it so. And this classification system was working, and I was fortunate to start I did my PhD with Rag, and then based on his initial finding, I developed the whole classification system. And how the classification system is working. So they have given a numbering, alpha antitrypsin numbering, they have given to introns. So they map the intron on the protein. So whenever the intron is starting, there will be a protein sequence matching to it, and then they give a number. So their intron has a number. This number was initially present. This two type was initially present somewhere during course of evolution, and these introns are inserted and become group 2, 4, 6, and the other side 4, 3, 5, 1, 3. 3, and we'll see those in a minute, how exactly what I'm saying. And then we started looking how these classification system work when did these 6 group originated? What is the ortholog and paralog in vertebrate serpents? And can we find one of the ancestors of these serpents? And can we find if the introns are inserting, how it is happening? So to do that, you have to plot everything in evolutionary scale. So this is a scale at one point I draw. And then we see that there is at one point, each species started coming out. Plants became separate, fungi become separate. And human is in this red area, vertebrate. And then there were several vertebrates and then invertebrates. And we were looking into, if we are looking for origin of human protein or human gene, we have to trace back in this direction first. Once we have conquered until here, then we can go to other insects, plants, whatever you want to do. But first we have to trace back in the red zone and then orange zones, invertebrates, Siona and Bankiostoma, sea urchin, and so on, and then see whether we can find some sort of ancestors. So when we are doing that, we have to take account of genomic data and tools which are available, and we can take tools from, as I told you, NCBI is a major tool. NCBI tools we took it. Then there are specialized data sets for genomic data set from different sources. Ensemble tool we have taken. Today we'll see how NCBI is used in this context, and in Ensemble. Fruit flies or Drosophila has its own database, or other species have their own databases and their papers also. Wherever there's a paper, we have listed. And then these tools, and full NCBI and Swiss Prot, UniProt, and all these model Ensemble and specialized databases are required. So what we did was gather the sequences in the research protocol we developed, gather the sequences from different sources, and then combine by BLAST, combine those into collect the sequences, make a super HMM genome wide assignment, and also make gene structure prediction, do a lot of alignments, try to pinpoint intron position, sequence identity, how reactive center look like, other gene motif, diagnostic sites, do a lot of alignment editing, and derive some more markers, and then you will come up with the orthologs, and from orthologs you build a phylogenetic tree of various kind. And once you have phylogenetic tree, you start doing evaluation of phylogenetic tree based on the feature derived previously, and then at the end you draw inference or results that what you have, what one has achieved, and what is the biological implication or clinical implication one we get. So to start with, we had redone the classification, as I told you. So this classification says that at least 450 to 500 million years ago, this group classification was valid from fish to human, not just initially developed from mouse and rat. So it is not just mouse and rat, but it's on a larger scale true. And these are intron positions, and these are the group members were listed here. And then you have, so when we look into further detail, I told you that the group 1 and 2 have more members, and we see that across different species that is holding true. These members have different numbers, and the green one is mouse. Mouse has even more genes than human has, and we'll see those. And when we look into the genomic locus, which we'll be discussing today and tomorrow also in comparative genomics, so that what happens in locus, there in the fish there is only 2 genes, and in locus itself there is a duplication event occurring, and then frog their number become 4, their number extends in chicken further, and become 2 different classes because of new introns. And but number keep on increasing in the same locus. So basically left and right you see the wipe is present here also, wipe is present here also. So it's not jumping somewhere else, it's jumping within the locus itself, and by duplication creating a new copy within a group. So it's not that another group member is created. It's the group one only, and they created and merged. In human, later on, the chromosome was break up, and this chicken chromosome 2B, 2Q is actually broke up and converted into human or primate mammals into 2 chromosomes. Specifically, is very predominant in mammals, and we see that this went into another class, but still the marker genes is conserved. And this side also you'll see some yeah, so these are marker genes which are conserved. So basically you can trace back that these were at some point same locus. And then we build up the tree, and we'll see some of the tree building. Once we have the concept that what is duplicating into what, we build up a tree. Any species are given here, and we will try to build up our own tree for one analysis. And then you can do the same thing for the second group, third group. In this, this is a reverse way. So there's the lower ones are fishes, which have less number of the genes. Red one are the gene we are interested in. And we go from, these are fishes, 2 genes are there. From frog, that copy, again, duplication is occurring at the same locus. And then the locus is expanding as we go to human. And I've not taken the mouse. The number, same locus number will be even more than human. And then reactive center loop is actually retained in different species. They are all mostly inhibitory in nature. And again, we build up the same tree based on the knowledge we had that these are alpha antitrypsin-like group 2 members, and these are ZPI-like group members, and there is some sub-classification. So once we know that what we want to depict, do in the tree, one can build the tree easily. But the initial knowledge is coming from here. And then we imbibe into the tree. And then we also have some members, AGT, in an independent locus in this family. And so on. And in one of the case, V3, we could identify the so this is a locus, and locus is found until here into vertebrate, and we could find the locus into invertebrate as well, and not very large locus, but locus was retained. And then we could identify the markers like C-terminal extension and reactive center loop, and the indels were present in these members. So based on that, we could identify one of the ancestral class of serpine from invertebrate for a human ortholog. And same applies to duplication and all is going on. So I'll just skip. If you're interested, there are papers on it. You can read about it. And then in the group 4, what happens, that is very, very funny thing happened, that the tetrapod serpine or C1 inhibitor has only serpine domain, all these tetrapods, single domain, and then Ig immunoglobulin-like domain is added in the fishes. And so that's what we have shown you here. The fishes have, so we did a domain prediction for each sequence, and then one can find that they poses extra domain, and there were, if it is a mistake, you'll find only when one fishes, and it was there in more than 10 fishes. So definitely this was not a sequencing error also. And then we could build a model, and then we build the protein as IG1, IG2 domain as well of this protein on the model. So we see that there is extra domain, clearly an extra domain attached to the, which is not found anywhere else in the serpines. And this locus was more or less retained in the same location, and we can map this by reactive center loop on using a sequence logo. And we'll make sequence logo today, so that you have an idea. Sequence logo is telling you G is predominantly here, because G is very big, and then A is predominantly here, VE is predominantly here, and there are few changes in this region, and then more changes are in this region, and residues are conserved. So we have tried to map what is happening in tetrapod versus fishes, and we see that these are conserved. Even this is conserved, but this region found in tetrapods was not found in fishes. So minor changes there, but not physiologically significant maybe. But there is a change in tetrapod versus fishes. And similarly, we draw it for an antithrombin, the phylogenetic tree. Whole idea is to show you more tree, more structure, how we'll draw it, and then we will draw it. And if you're interested, you can read. Different papers are there, and it was not drawn in one day. It was drawn over a period of time, and rethinking, strategifying differently. So yeah, this one I will tell you again tomorrow. So don't worry about it. So what we identified is that we identified one of the gene from invertebrate, which is from sea anemone to human, and which could date the ancestor to 700 million years ago. And serpins are maintained from fish to human, with some changes in serpin in different group, differential presence. And obviously one neuroserpin ortholog is found in sea anemone. And also we have some intron inserted, which I will discuss it again tomorrow in the comparative genomic class in detail. So then we build up, over the period of time, we have built up different phylogenetic trees. Bayesian method, maximum likelihood. In the same figure, we draw it. We wanted to classify melanocortin receptors from different classes, 5 different classes there. And to prove that there are 5 distinct classes, we used 2 different phylogenetic methods in this paper. In one of the method where we have de novo assembly of Colorado potato beetle. Colorado potato beetle is chopping the potato fields and destroying potatoes in Western Hemisphere and some portion of Asia as well, like China. So, and they are invasive species, means they were not native species. They went by mistake, like if somebody was going to America, they bring Colorado potato beetle there, and then beetle started growing and they destroy it. We wanted to, we were the first one who analyzed the Colorado potato beetle transcriptome and genomics later on, where we could identify, we wanted to tell which are the critical genes in this. And so those critical genes we have mapped on phylogenetic scale. So there are 2 examples I'm giving in this, and there are 2 are, you see different classes are colored differently, a circular tree, and we will try to see some of the circular trees if we can make along with you the different trees. And why you making a tree actually? So you just want to see what is the difference between chimpanzee and human population, suppose, and what is the difference between a tiny man and a Superman, and how their genetic trait changes and when they actually change. So that's what you do it, and these are primarily driven by mutations, and mutations can be silent. Silent mutation means at 3rd codon you have A and there is a G here, and there's no change in amino acid, so this is silent mutation. Then you have nonsense mutation where G changing into U lead into stop codon. Then you have missense mutation where the amino acid change is there. So A is changing into C, that will lead into glutamate to aspartate, and that will changes. These changes are, you can see those changes, and this can be also a change on chromosomal level where you have deletion here, and you have duplication. So the genes were they were duplicated in cluster. Those were duplication events actually. So you have duplication, and this will lead into DRAM. So it is constantly evolving. The world is, or entire planet is constantly evolving at its own pace, or all living entities. And then mutations can be, obviously, many of you know that insertion can be one of the type of mutation, deletion, inversion, base substitution, duplication, which I have already shown you. So there are kind of different type of mutation, and all these will make change, and change is paramount of evolution. And obviously, if a change in the genetic code or a point mutation will lead into different amino acid. You see that 4 alanines are made here. Only last codon is changing. And so if you know the codon, what codon will lead into what kind of, so here in this case, you see that N is asparagine is produced by first 2 letters being constant A, and U or C will lead into asparagine, and lysine will be produced by 3rd and 4th. So codon has already given you a hint that what will change, and that will bring into what kind of a third position. If there is a change, what will be the outcome of it? So that's why the missense variation is causing such changes, and these changes are actually constantly evolving during it can be beneficial and or harmful to the individual. That is another thing, but this is constantly going due to several adaptive changes that occurs. Let us see how you have DNA which will code into amino acid. Amino acid will fold and make a 3D-dimensional structure, and then the 3-dimensional structure will dictate the protein function and determine the cellular activity. So that's how the classical mechanism of living entities is from DNA to cellular level occurs. And then if you want to detect some sequence at DNA or protein level, you have to do the BLAST alignment. BLAST searches, and BLAST searches we'll do today. In BLAST searches, what happens that you have a query sequence of length X, length L, suppose. The BLAST will break into small pieces and look for matches. And these matches will be then extended in both directions. And that will lead into, so this is extension happening. And then that will finally lead into, if they find two extended hit, they will call maximum segmental pair. So BLAST is not looking whole length search, but it's doing a local search. And therefore it has a name, basic local alignment search tool. So it will align to a position and extend left and right. And so therefore in a BLAST, if you have done BLAST for one hit, there are 2 results, because if this is extended until the end from A to B, from start to end, that is fine. If not, there will be 2 different results. And to do the BLAST result, suppose you need a sequence, and sequence is normally found in the FASTA format. Greater than sign is the header line, where it can be any name. It can be ID, name, something. So I have shown you a classical example, and I have made a sequence on BLAST6. So basically, whatever you can name with your name, the program, or you only this is the protein sequence. So if you name it with your name rather than BLAST6, that is fine, because this is just an header. Ultimately, it doesn't matter what is the name of the sequence. And so I have deliberately done it, and we are going to test this sequence for doing BLAST. And then once you have BLAST, you have protein sequence. So this is the protein sequence, a linear alphabet, but protein has to fold to do a function, and the protein sequence has to go into a structure. And if you can do X-ray crystallography or NMR, then you can find the structure, which is very laborious and computationally impossible, or with limited resources impossible. And even if the resources are there, sometimes it takes years to crystallize one protein. So the alternative or faster way, if you are looking for a solution, you can take the protein sequence and try to model it to already known structures. So if I say my brother is Senthil. So what do you imagine about Senthil? You imagine that is a human, like will have 2 arms, 2 legs, will be walking on 2 foot, right? Not on 4 foot, right? Because you have imagination how human will look like. So this, if I say Serpin has a same way a protein fold, and you can start imagining how the structure will be. So if the algorithm knows what sequence you are providing it, it will model it and then give you based on the model it should have. It will give you an correct or semi-correct. So if I say Senthil is my brother, you will imagine a human, right? But I may call a dog a brother. So, but then I have to tell you it precisely. So, but the algorithm will look into the matter clearly, whether they find exact 3-dimensional structure or not, and if not, they will also tell the limitation. So that's when the protein modeling is done. For protein modeling, we need the protein sequence, as we saw here. So we are going to model this sequence later on. So we need a sequence, and we look for a structural homologs, and then pick up the best with the highest sequence identity. That's what you do, but now the programs are smart and they will do it for you. And then look for a good alignment. So basically, if your sequence and a structure sequence will be model on a known structure, you look for a good alignment. Maybe you may need to change something, you see errors, and then now the program can also do it. But you can do make a good alignment. Maybe you can change the template. Maybe you wanted, suppose I say you clone a human. You will say, okay, I want to clone on Amitabh Bachchan or clone on Tom Cruise. It's up to you, because so there will be multiple structures, and then you want to clone on different. I'm repeating myself, I guess. So you can clone on the same structure with a different ID, or there are multiple choices you have. So you can choose, and then you can do Swiss model, modeler, or ITESR, and then you will need to optimize the structure. So there are different tools. So one tool is ITESR, which is predominantly used, but for using ITESR, one needs an official email ID. Like it will only work with email ID of an office or institute or university, and not work with Gmail also. And there are different tools, and then your GeneThreader is another tool. So star ones are which I marked, and one can try different tools, but we'll try few of them today. And then what happens is that there are different tools, as I told you. These are listed. You can go through. Modeler and Swiss model and iTracer is used primarily. So we are going to use Swiss model today for model the sequence which I have given you. And then there are different ways of modeling. So actually, you can obtain the target sequence, whatever you want to, you can get it. So let's say I will give you the sequence to model today. Then you will find a template and do a comparative modeling. And then you will do second step, which is called fold recognition. And third is ab initio calculation, means you will have no prior. In first case, you have a template. In second case, you will only get fold. And third case, you will try to see energy minimization, and you will build a model based on and access the model. So we'll see what are the differences between these models. So if a sequence identity is very high, you can do any kind of modeling. If sequence identity is lower, you need a model can sequence identity is going down. You need to do de novo structure very high. Then it's up to you. You can choose anything. So these are different applications. So We will use Swiss model today. This is the paper here, Swiss model, and this is the website. And we will be modeling. So once you model, you will get the structure, and then favorable and unfavorable regions, and different statistical figures. So what in homology modeling people are doing, that they choose template and initial alignment, and where I told you that you can edit your alignment if you are not satisfied, you can do it. And you can correct those alignment. Then you do modeling of backbone generation loop. So these will be time consuming. So basically, you automatic one is that you allow first alignment, give alignment to the let everything done by the software. So that one we are going to do. And then once you have time, suppose you are doing 6-month thesis, you can actually look into loop modeling, sidechain modification, model optimization, validation, and then further on you can also do molecular docking. Suppose you are working with the coronavirus protein, you can model the protein and then dock a drug. But coronavirus is a pandemic, right? So what happens in coronavirus? Most of the tools have taken this step from you. They have already generated the model for docking, so you can directly take their final structure. Because pandemic, everybody needs a solution, either drug or vaccine quickly. So this step is in the pen. Most of the software which are doing Swiss model, ITSF, they have COVID-19 protein ready model for docking and molecular simulation. So one can do molecular simulation and apply in other areas of maybe for visualization or some other application. Maybe you want to try one drug against different protein, can work on coronavirus, can work on even to some other cancer. It is possible because one of the coronavirus vaccine is actually not vaccine for coronavirus. It was developed for cancer. So now it is used for, say, this is repurposing. So you can think whether you can repurpose, and obviously if you have a knowledge, acquire knowledge, discuss with others, you can actually repurpose one drug for different purposes. So once you get your target sequence, means your sequence of interest, you will look into these numbers, and I will explain you what is the number means here. This is PDB ID and the chain 1, chain 2. And then you look how is the alignment going on. So you see there is not very good alignment in the beginning. Then the good alignment is going on, bad alignment, good alignment, and so on is going on. And then you just need to choose what is best for you. In the first time, if you are aligning, anything is good because there's no guarantee of accuracy. The second time you do it again, like suppose a first helicopter you build in, nobody probably bothered. It should fly, it should not fall down. But efficiency and other criteria of helicopter development blown up several fold today from 1900 to 1 century later. And so you was looking for safety, you're looking for several other features. And so the homology modeling also, the same concept is applying, that once you have it, you will improve it. So the homology modeling by Swiss model will give us a quality score. If the quality score is good, that is bluish region here in this is the best region. Most of the region here are bad. So what are the changes one can bring to the sequence, or do change the strategy to make everything blue is possible? Maybe change the model, maybe change the template sequence may require some changes, or model template itself has to be changed. So that one has to look for different criteria when you are doing the homology modeling. One of the controls of the homology modeling is this Ramachandran plot. And Ramachandran plot, you plot the residues on dihedral angles, and there are favorable regions, the green ones, and unfavorable regions are white ones. So the residues have to fall in this region, maximum to whitish, greenish white region. If residues falling outside, let me see, there are two residues falling outside. They are not in very, they create problems. So if the more residues are outside, only two are there, it's okay. But if more residues are outside, suppose this red balls, all of them are in white region, then this will create a problem. Then model is not correct and one has to redo the. So Ramachandran plot was developed at Indian Institute of Sciences and in Bangalore, and then this is a globally used for checking model. And so accuracy of model is predicted based on this how much of the residues are in non-favorable regions. If there are more, then it's not correct. If it is not, or if there are very less of them, and this is counted for in general for glycine and proline. So you see in this figure, for this protein, there are two residues going out, but out of several residues, only two are going. It's okay in the first round. And what can be changed, or if I change the method itself, it will be improved? Like if I'm modeling the Swiss model, can we go and model with other tool and can it be improved? And similarly, you will also look for each specialized region, do ab initio modeling for the regions which are not covered in general, to improve. Suppose we build up an human model. Suppose I am modeling a human. I could model everything and only toes are missing. So then I have to use another method for making toes, or I can draw the toes using an artistic view. So and that's what you see in the painting or statue designing and all. People will use their own intelligence. So you have to think, okay, if this loop is fitting or this linker region is fitting or not fitting in my requirement or my understanding, one will look at it to do it. And then you see that there are two different Q means are shown here. The Q mean in the red is minus, and then the Q mean of 2.44 was achieved after optimization. So you see that when you improve, make some changes, you will see even in Ramachandran plot that something was unfavorable become favorable, because you'll check the model, optimized model again. So one of the example I'm giving here, in which we have published recently, that we were looking for exonuclease enzyme in one of the fungi, and we could build up the protein model. Then what we did was we had this sequence alignment, which we'll learn a little bit today, and then we did the modeling, and then we localized based on the knowledge of literature. We have also marked it here, the star regions. So these are reactive center. These are the critical residues, the red stars, and we can mark those into the structure. And that we wanted to give an insight. The exonuclease of this fungi was never known. Exoinulase actually. So it was never known before, and this is a critical enzyme for production of drug-like compound. So basically, we employed simple sequence structure knowledge to designing, helping in a protein which is important for production of a drug. Okay, so what we are going to do today, we'll run a BLAST using this sequence today. And then we will also check in NCBI how NCBI looks like and what all we'll get out of NCBI. And we'll run the NCBI BLAST. Then we will also check in Ensemble database what all we are seeing. Then we'll make homology modeling of this this sequence. I don't know what sequence it is, so at the end of the practice we'll know what is the sequence. Okay. So, and then this is Swiss model, as I told you. And we will be going to that. And then what we are going to do, we are going to generate a sequence logo. So what I have done here, I have taken for translational bioinformatics. You can take your own name and make a web logo using WebLogo 3 website, and then maybe a modification. So I have done translational bioinformatics word together, and then I have changed the T into F, M bioinformatics into bioinformatics. And that's what we can do. And obviously we'll do the modeling, and then we'll also see Mega and some other tools for phylogenetic genetic analysis. And also this will go on comparative genomics. There we'll see more things. So I really thank you, and we are thankful to our organizations. And if you want to work with us or want to collaborate, we are always available. And somebody want to have discuss some job also, that's also possible. We normally put our ads in different websites.